Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm going to do a bit of an intro to our presenters today, and then we'll get started. So the Teleska Center for Justice, 5 decades of innovation is who we have here today. They're a groundbreaking collaboration of 4 legal organizations dedicated to stabilizing lives through the power of law by providing civil legal representation to low-income individuals in Monroe County. The Teleska Center benefits 45,000 community members annually. The innovative model is unique in the way it melds disparate public funding with private support and volunteer efforts to address clients' current needs and anticipate their future challenges. And our presenters today, we have a couple different folks here. Lori O'Brien serves as the Executive Director of Legal Assistance of Western New York, that's Law New York, a nonprofit dedicated to ensuring justice is accessible to all and a partner within the Teleska Center for Justice. She has been with Law New York since 2007 and practiced in various areas of law impacting our community's health, housing, and economic status. And then also from Law New York, we have Danielle Muscovitz. She is the managing attorney for Law New York as well. And Rob, our very own Rob, he's been an advocate for the effective institutional delivery of legal services for the community since 1977. In real life, Rob is a lawyer facilitating employee ownership of private businesses nationally. He has sung in the Downtown Church Choir since 1972. So, Lori, the floor is yours, and I'll.
Well, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here. And, happy to talk about civil legal services, but really happy to talk about collective impact, because I think that's what the Teleska Center for Justice represents. When we're talking about civil legal services, let's just step back and say, what is that? We're talking about the essentials of life. So that's someone's income, health, housing, family, education. All of these areas, individuals may experience a legal barrier, and legal services is part of the solution to help people find their way to self-sufficiency, economic security, and family stability. So why civil legal aid? Only 20% of low-income Americans receive legal help for the civil legal problems they face each year. Data shows you are more successful in court cases, in eviction matters, in disputes, if you're represented. Civil legal services is really about helping people navigate these challenges, and to be the most effective, really partnering with other services in our community to make sure we're treating individuals holistically. We know that individuals don't walk into our offices with a legal issue alone. And part of our role in civil legal aid is making sure we see that whole person and that we work together to make sure that when they leave us, they are on a path of stability and of understanding what advocacy looks like for themselves and empowering them to be able to see results not only with our services, but being educated about the law and how it can help them and their families going forward. So our goals here are to empower people, to protect their rights, to strengthen the communities. There is a lot of need in our individual community. And one of the ways we have done this here in Monroe is to work together and to bring our services together through co-location, through holistic projects, in order to better meet the needs of Monroe County residents. I'm going to ask Rob to join me.
So thanks, Lori. So this is a mission-based organization. So there are 3 congregations that worship in this building. And one of the common moral imperatives that binds us all together is the idea that we're democratizing the blessings of the world so that everybody gets to participate at an effective level in the things that are most important to us that Lori was talking about. And what we're going to talk about today is democratizing access to the justice system, because it's the single most effective way that an individual, not necessarily the whole society, but that an individual can secure and protect the blessings that they're due, whether it's housing, whether it's health care, whether it's citizenship and residence, and all of the other critical things that go to make the basic blessings of our lives. I want to take just a minute to go over the history of what we're talking about here, because I think it's important, particularly for the Justice Center. There are a lot of places that have civil legal services to the poor, but they vary tremendously in the way they're delivered. And in 1977, Justin Vigdor, who was, some of you may know Justin, was a giant in this community. He was one of the founders of the Al Siegel Center. He was one of the founders of the Fringe Festival. He passed away the day after Christmas last year at age 95, and for his whole life was an activist and a very effective activist. And in 1977, he was the president of the Monroe County Bar Association. Subsequently went on to be president of the New York State Bar Association. But at that time, he was president of the Monroe County Bar Association. He commissioned a study on the delivery of civil legal services to the poor. And this study was interesting and somewhat novel in that it included users of civil legal services, because one of the tendencies we have, of course, is to tell people what we know they ought to do. And it turns out that it's more effective if you ask people what they think they need. And so with that kind of invention behind this study, we discovered that what we needed to do was to consolidate, coordinate, and increase the accessibility of civil legal services. At that time, the organizations were located all over the area. Well, so take a single mother who has 2.5 jobs and 6 hours to sleep and cook and take care of everything else, and put her on a bus with transfers and send her to 4 different places, 3 of which tell her that they can't help her because it's outside of their mission, but maybe she could go here, and you will discourage that person from finding anything that helps them out. So we discovered that need, and we worked very hard to bring the organizations together. And ultimately, it culminated in 2005, again with Justin Vigdor's amazing leadership, in the building at 1 West Main Street that houses the Teleska Justice Center and the organizations that we're talking about. And so what we now had was a major step forward in that people could go to one place. And then we had central intake and referral so that people could find out where they needed to go right at the desk. And you know, it seems looking back like, oh, well, that's not even an invention, that's obvious. But we weren't there in 1977, and it took us to 2005 to get there. Now, one of the problems that we have is that we have disparate sources of funding. So some of the organizations are funded with federal dollars. In fact, I think you told me 23% of our dollars are federal at this point.
That's right, for Law New York.
For Law New York. But there's also New York State funding. And what happens is the funding crashes into program, because some people will fund X and some people will fund Y, and kind of nobody institutional will fund everything. And now we have an even more serious problem, because with the chaos that we have in our society right now, some of the funding is going to get cut for things that are not politically possible at this point. So historically, we've had an annual campaign that was called the Campaign for Justice. And that was kind of fun. And I used to participate. We'd all get together and we'd call our friends who were lawyers and we'd beat them out of money. And they'd say, well, I'll give you an amount equal to my hourly rate. And we'd say, no, we got to have twice that. And Mike Schnittman, who was another amazing person in the organization, used to be able to, hit us up for a whole lot of money. But it was fun. And it was kind of once a year. It was once a year, and it was annual in its formation. So what happened is in October of this past year, the four organizations got together and said we need to coordinate in a more effective way. And we need to put together a system so that we can not only fund the things that couldn't ordinarily be funded, but we need to be able to fund the things that we anticipate that we'll need. Because the state thinks of stuff, and the feds think of stuff, and the private bar thinks of stuff, but there are things that we don't even see that come up. There are new areas of practice where we have to move, and we need to be able to fund that. Now, fortunately, we have a fourth prong here, which is called Just Cause. It used to be called Volunteer Legal Services Program, that involves about 1,500 or 1,600 lawyers in our service area who volunteer substantial amounts of time to help out. And of course, those people are unfettered by the funding sources, but it's never enough. But what we've done with this Teleska Justice Center in October is to create a brand new model, the likes of which is not really very common in the United States. Most of the organizations are separate in most places. And it is now coordinated in such a way that we can deliver a broad spectrum of services to the people who are in need. So we're going to move back to Lori and talk about the four agencies that are involved and what they do, because everybody thinks, oh, legal aid. Well, it's not, oh, legal aid. It's a whole lot of stuff that happens. And we're going to talk about the collective impact of the agencies. And there are two handouts that Danielle passed out and that are available. I think they're available on the table, that show what an astonishing multiplier effect the delivery of legal services has, so that $1 of legal services expenditures helps the community to the extent of $10. You have a 10-to-1 ratio because of the leverage that the justice system applies. And then we'll talk a little bit about the future path of justice for all, which is what we're all in this and all about. Lori?
Well, I want to start a little bit with when I started at Law New York. I came to Rochester to work for Law New York 18 years ago. About 6 months, we were about 6 months away from moving into the Teleska Center for Justice. So Rob just mentioned leveraging. When we think about leveraging resources, coming together to do fundraising, coming together to provide holistic services, one of the things that mattered the most to me was the ability to work with other advocates, to work with other agencies, to have all of those experts in the same building, so that when I served an individual community member, I could reach out and ask another organization, ask an attorney downstairs from me, and get that help immediately. And I think that's one of the strongest things we do together through collaboration, is really work together to meet that individual need. So the Teleska Center partners, I'll start with Law New York. Law New York provides direct legal services, multiple areas of law. We serve 14 counties. Monroe definitely is our biggest office and the biggest need. The other counties we serve represent the Finger Lakes and the Southern Tier. The Legal Aid Society, also a direct service provider representing individuals. Legal Aid Society has been in this community for over 100 years. They're also a regional program and have offices and services outside of the Monroe County area. Just Cause, as Rob indicated, Just Cause is our pro bono partner, about 1,500 volunteers. Really, the importance of having that pro bono partner expand on what we can do in terms of staff programs and really figure out how do we best deploy the resources we have, right? Empire Justice Center. Empire Justice Center provides direct services. Empire is also provides a lot of legislative work and other types of advocacy work. They also run the cash program that helps people with tax returns and tax filings. And so when you think about these 4 agencies, why is it important to have all of us here? Well, we are law firms. We have ethical responsibilities. One big thing that we're able to do is if for any reason there's a conflict for, say, Law New York, we're able to utilize and leverage those other offices to make sure that individuals can get assistance. That's really important to me when I think about Law New York as a whole. We don't have those collaborations throughout our service area. And sometimes in our counties, we're the only legal service office there. And so that multiplier by being part of a collective is really impactful for the work we do. Each of these organizations combined, we serve an incredible amount of community members. So when you take a look at this information and the information that Danielle passed out, look at the collective impact on an annual basis. That's 1.2 million in volunteer civil legal services, right? Thinking about, you know, those 1,500 volunteers and what they can contribute to our community in their time and their expertise. 45,000 community members benefited from representation. So we may help an individual client, that help is exponential, right? So when we think about their household, we think about their children, their family members. If I'm helping an individual prevent an eviction, or potentially, you know, you need medical care and that medical care has been denied, you need advocacy with a health insurance company. We help individuals gain employment. So many individuals in our communities are stopped from seeking out certain employment opportunities, potentially because of a criminal record in their past. And we have individuals that support ceilings and support certificates of relief to get people into those job opportunities. We also do other opportunity programs. So think about fair housing. Unfortunately, there is still rampant discrimination in housing. And when we look at what's been happening the last few years in terms of the eviction rate, the low stock of affordable housing, it is really important that we keep those doors open and allow people to have access to the housing that fits the needs for their families. Also think about employment or education. We have an advocate that works on education issues, helping families really obtain meaningful access to education for their children and the supports they need in schools. That is in addition to, you know, helping individuals who are in crisis. And again, you mentioned eviction. Sometimes it's homelessness. Sometimes, you know, there are things that happen in our lives that we have no control over. Maybe a family member has become ill. Maybe they were your primary breadwinner. Now we have a family that's in need of temporary income supports or other support to just keep going. These are the types of services we provide. When you look at the, you know, I immediately go to the impact on that individual, and I feel like this is why I'm in this work. But if I step back, you also think about the financial benefits to the community around us. And so you can see on this slide itself, the vast amount of financial benefits to individual clients. Sometimes that's lump sum dollar amounts, sometimes that's monthly benefits or monthly payments. There's also taxpayer savings. There's contributions we're making on a statewide level to bring dollars into our community and ensure that not only are we helping that individual's wellness and health, but we're elevating the community's wellness. Rob.
So with respect to impact, I can tell one anecdote. As many of you know, I was on the Rochester City School Board for 8 years, which was an experience that I would not want to repeat, but was extraordinarily valuable. And these guys were after us all the time. And while I can't say that they kept us honest, we certainly thought about being more honest as a result of their involvement. But I was thinking about, we're talking about impacting about 4.5% of the people in the statistical metropolitan area in Rochester. And to put that in concrete terms, that means that if you're at the Blue Cross Arena at a full event, the probability is there'll be about 525 people who've been affected by this system. If you're at a Red Wings game, it's a little higher, maybe 570 people if the stadium is full. If you're at Batavia Downs or the racetracks, it's about 150 people. I mean, if you're at Constellation Brands Arena in Canandaigua, it's about 630 people. If you're in a fully occupied sanctuary of this church, there are 30 to 40 people, just statistically, who will have been affected. That is a stunning impact on the community. And as Lori was saying, we're helping the individuals and their families. But, one of my favorite things about being a lawyer is we keep the populace from killing one another. I mean, we have a way to bring people together, sometimes force them together to work out problems. And when we can supply access to justice, we help prevent violence against people and property. We help keep people from taking their issues to the streets. And those are stunningly important social benefits of having the system as a whole be healthy with respect to the participation of everybody. And I'd like to talk just a little bit about innovation. Maybe I'm not good at slides. Okay. So the thing about the Teleska Center, if we can get this permanent fund up and going, and it's starting, people are starting to contribute to it. We're talking about demonstration projects that we couldn't otherwise get funded. I mean, people don't like stuff that they never heard of. As you know, you spring a new idea on somebody, people don't surprise well. So what we have to do is we have to discover the needs by experience, and then we have to figure out ways to solve the problem. And like it or not, the folks who do this deserve salaries and stuff like that. So what we're doing is we're building the facility for innovation. And when you think about the almost 50 years that we've been innovating in this community in terms of the collaboration of legal services and in terms of making them more accessible, that innovation has been a continuing thread for all of the 50 years, starting with Justin Vigdor's vision of where we should be going. The collaborative intake Lori has already described. If you can bring somebody in and address their problems in a holistic way, because as she said, our people come in with multiple problems and they're all intertwined. It's not like we're just going to solve this contract. That might be true of my clients. That's not true of the people that we're talking about. And then just the co-location we've already talked about. The shared community reception of the idea of this collaboration is something that we need to push forward more and more so that everybody in our community understands not only what services are available, but how to get people to them. So I had a call from somebody in downtown Church not so long ago saying that, many years ago I had referred them to an immigration lawyer for an issue. And that immigration lawyer, who's a wonderful person, has since retired. So could I find somebody else? We need to have a way that people understand that there's a common place to call. You have an immigration problem, you know somebody with an immigration problem, you know somebody whose health insurance has been cut off unjustly, you know where to call, and you get an answer, and you get somebody who can work with that person. So that's where we want to go with our next level at the Teleska Justice Center, so that ultimately we get to the point where we do, in fact, have equal justice for all.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've been for the last few years. You know, I mentioned when I started at Law New York, and that collaboration was so essential to the work we did. Over the years, we have many joint projects. So a big focus is to not duplicate services. There are areas of law where the need is so much greater than our collective efforts combined. So housing is a good example of that. In those areas, we're combining forces to really make sure there's enough support to our community. When I think about the last few years, it's hard not to think about the pandemic and how that not only changed lives for all of us, right? But changed our community members, how they seek services and what services they need. And so as Rob is talking about, thinking about things like demonstration projects, when you are predominantly government funded, predominantly grant funded, that is a complex system of eligibility requirements that I don't want an individual walking into the Teleska Center to feel like they need to sort out. And so one of the most important things is making sure that we have the resources to fill in those gaps so that, yes, if you walk into our door today and you fit squarely within a supported grant-funded program, that's great. But we don't want to turn you away if you don't. And so, you know, when I think about my time here, we have year over year expanded that work we've been doing together, and expanded our collaboration and programming. And it just made sense that the next step is really to think again about our operations and not just how we fundraise together. And I'm going to say, you know, fundraising is important. You know, that is part of the reason we're here today. But what's more important is how do we communicate about our services? And we think about the Teleska Center 2.0, whatever we want to call it at this point, right? It's, are we sending the same message to the community we serve so that, as Rob said, you know where to send someone who needs help, you know what services are available. We're not creating some confusion based on having multiple agencies, but we're sending that unified message to the world. Part of that is also, you know, how we operate that kind of shared work together. And so a couple of years ago, we did identify the need for a shared staff member. So when we think about the Fund for Justice going forward, we're putting time and resources into this to, again, make sure it's not just about fundraising, but it's about how we interact with the community we serve. How do people reach us, and how do people really understand about the services we offer? I want to move on a little bit to just where we are now. You know, there is always uncertainty about certain funding. And as I said, you know, many of our organizations, all of the Teleska Center partners are primarily funded, again, by government grants. And so those grants come with eligibility requirements, and there's some uncertainty to whether funding sources continue. The most important thing we can do for our community is be there and be there consistently. I think we all know of programs that have started and stopped, not to any fault of their own, but because of the resources that they had available. And so when I talk to you about the work that we're doing that's touching on housing and income and health and education and family, it is important that we're offering those services, but that tomorrow when you call, we're still offering those services. And so that is a big, important piece to me about the Fund for Justice and what it means. One is filling in those gaps so that if you don't fit squarely into an eligibility requirement, we can still say, yes, come on in. Let's figure out what's going on and let's see how we can support you. But the second is really making sure our programs and services are here to stay, and that when you come to rely on them, we're not taking them back because of funding or resources. When we think about, especially, starting with the pandemic, I think there was definitely a renewed sense of collaboration among the Teleska partners. Throughout that time, we met on a weekly basis. When we are saying we're collaborating, this is intentional. And this is client first, community first, right? And sometimes we don't see that happening in large part because frankly, sometimes resources are scarce. And sometimes that is what divides agencies or divides organizations. But each of these agencies under the Teleska Center, we've made a firm commitment that we are stronger together and we're going to go forward together. I'm going to ask Rob if he wants to add.
No, the only thing I would like to add is one anecdote that, so DEI is a big deal, right? For some reason, people think it means some kind of discrimination against somebody, but it doesn't. It's anti-discriminatory. So we're very into DEI in a lot of ways. And it's an important thrust. But you have a really serious problem because there are people who want to make even thinking about that illegal. So where are you going to get government funding? Okay. Maybe New York, but Lori was just telling me she was talking with someone in a similar situation in Montana, where there's 70% federal funding. They're finished with DEI as a practical matter. If this current group of people decides that they're going to punish them by taking away their funding, which it turns out is happening, right? So one of the things that we've done just here, where we don't have quite that bad a problem, is to catalyze an interesting continuing education program that's being sponsored by Harter Sechrist, which is one of the major law firms in town. And what we're going to do is try to show people how they don't have to be between a rock and a hard place. So let's suppose that you have an employer who wants to continue their DEI program, because most employers who started it discover that it's really cool to have diversity, right? You get better ideas, you get more enthusiasm, you get a lot of people working together more closely, and it's something that they would do on their own. But now you got a Justice Department who's coming in and investigating companies that have DEI programs on the theory that it's some kind of violation of the Civil Rights Act. So New York, on the other hand, requires diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for some of their contracts. So now you've got the employer caught between a rock and a hard place, because what are they going to do? So our group has catalyzed really this discussion, because if the employers are uncertain, you can be sure of one thing. They're going to go back to hiring old white guys like me, because that's the safe course of action, right? So the impact of that is indirect, but it's very real on the people that we want to serve. We have similar issues with immigration because we have pervasive xenophobia in the United States of America right now. And these are the kinds of problems that addressing the issues that we address through the Teleska Justice Center help us to surmount. So I would say that you have to think about the delivery of legal services, sort of, I'm going to say this sort of in summation, but Lori may have more intelligent things to say to finish up. You have to think about the delivery of legal services as a way to strengthen our society as a whole. It's not just based on empathy. It's based on the very practical need to make the society work by assuring participation of everybody who can add anything. And that's our commitment, and that's what justice for all means. And that's why we need to democratize the access to our legal system. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Sam, you have a question?
Well, okay, and then microphone. Sorry.
We'll pass the microphone for questions. That was fabulous and very informative. But here we go with questions, Q&A. And when answering, if you guys could speak here.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a question, obviously, something we're interested in here at the church is about immigration law. And, oh, thank you. I've got to hold it properly. I'm just wondering, what are kind of services you provide for immigration? And also, I mean, you know, in this case, we're seeing where ICE comes in and whisks people away. There go the immigrants. They're out of the country. Anyway, it's sort of a crazy situation, but what kind of services do you provide for immigrants on a legal basis? And of course, you know, what's going on nationally is scaring everybody, including people who are want to support immigration.
Well, and if you feel scared.
Yeah.
How do the people directly affected? Now, I'm going to say this is a good example of, you know, the benefit to having the 4 agencies under one roof. 2 of the agencies, Legal Aid Society of Rochester and Just Cause, both provide immigration-related legal services. So if you do have an individual with an immigration issue, they can come to the Teleska Center, and there's 2 agencies that provide support in that substantive area of law.
Well, you have attorneys
Yes.
familiar with all the process.
So do you make an appointment or what do you do?
Yeah, that was my question. What's the process for working with Teleska Center?
So one, you could walk right in. We're right 1 West Main Street. There is a community reception. It's a shared reception among all of the providers. So individuals can go right into that reception area, speak to our staff members, and they can help those individuals find out the next steps to opening a case or having your case reviewed. You can actually call any one of the agencies and get to any one of us. So don't worry about calling Law New York. If you call Law New York and say you have an immigration issue, even though we don't practice in that area, we'll make a warm referral right within the same building to our colleagues that do practice in that area. Some agencies and groups also create individual referral processes. So for example, some agencies in the area or some collaborations in the area have like online referral systems. Some use fax referrals. We'll actually work with you if you're working with a group or an agency to figure out the best way for you to interact with us and get us referrals. We also have an online referral system, and a couple of the agencies in the building do. So if you go to lawnewyork.org, there is an online application process. So in the middle of the night, you have a legal issue and you just want to get your application in, or you want to help a friend or family member access our services, you can put that online application in. And again, if you don't make it to the right agency that does that service, we're all connected. And so we'll make sure you get to where you need to be.
I'd like to back up that question, go one step back. I heard you saying that you are trying to have people make it possible for people to become more aware to reach out to you folks. And I'm just wondering that currently, if I'm someone in, I don't know, Chautauqua County, and all of a sudden I have a housing issue, how do I mean, are you known, for instance, with social services in different counties? You know, how would I find my way to you? If it
Absolutely.
looks like you do cover that far away, but how would I know that there's someplace that can help me?
So Chautauqua County is actually in Law, New York service area. So you can, again, if you can call our Rochester number and still get our Jamestown office, right?
But how do I
But-
know you exist?
Okay, so a few things. One, we are on notices. So for example, if you're receiving benefits through the Department of Social Services and you receive a denial or discontinuance, that notice that's issued to individuals contains our name and information on the back. That's very similar for some other government benefits that you will also see our name and information. We have been working throughout our service area to make sure our information is available through the court system, and definitely on the court website you can find our information. Over the last few years, we've expanded tremendously in the area of housing law, and so part of that has really been working on making sure if you're affected by an eviction, you can find us. So many, government agencies share our information. We're definitely in 211. There's also a resource you might not have heard about. It's called Law Help New York. So anywhere in the state, you can find out what your legal aid office or legal services office is. And I can send that information out so it can be distributed as well. But Law Help New York, if you're, in St. Lawrence County, where I'm from, you might want to know who the provider is in that area, and you can find it on that website.
I have a question about immigration attorneys. I understand that Just Cause and Legal Aid have immigration attorneys, but I'm wondering, because they all sound like, from what I've heard, swamped with cases, I'm wondering if your organization is planning on hiring more immigration attorneys.
So I don't know if I can respond directly to that question because it's other organizations that have those programs. And the hiring of staff will depend on available resources, right? Now, one item that we talked about today is really the involvement of pro bono support. And so I know our friends at Just Cause have been focused tremendously on recruitment and training of volunteers in order to help with the increased need in that area.
Okay, thank you.
And they also have programs where
Come on up.
they have programs where lawyers can sign up for continuing ed that will bring them up to speed, at least enough to begin the process until you can turn it over to someone perhaps with more experience. And those occur periodically during the year. So it'll come out from a bar association notice or some other thing to the lawyers. If you're interested in doing immigration or whatever, we have a 2-hour course to get you started. So there's a very active program of bringing the volunteers up to speed. It's not like you just get thrown into this pool with somebody who's doing real estate closings and they're trying to, work their way through immigration law.
That's a really important point. And so multiple providers in the Teleska Center offer continuing legal education. So if there's any asks I have today, if you have an attorney in your life who would like to volunteer their time, please put them in touch with us.
I have a question. It's a little bit off center here at the moment, but right now there's a new plan afoot. We don't know where it's going to go, hopefully nowhere, to demand that people, in order to vote, prove their citizenship. And we all know that's just a plan to remove people from the voting rolls. There already are barriers to voting. So if I come across somebody who is having difficulty proving their right to vote, would that be somebody I could send to you?
So definitely individual legal issues related to barriers to voting could come to the Teleska Center for Justice. What I would like to see is a communication about what's happening so that we can make sure there's resources and the appropriate agency available for that type of service, because that would be relatively new for our agencies to handle.
I can comment on that.
Sure.
So, Bob, I would say that one thing people might want to do is contact the Monroe County Board of Elections and the Monroe County Democratic Committee, both of which have affirmative programs to help people vote. So in the case of the Democratic Committee, I don't know what the Republicans are doing. I confess that I haven't been real active with them. But I was chair of Monroe County Democratic Committee for a while. And we actually had lawyers on election day who, if you had any problem voting, would go in front of the Supreme Court and get an order that allowed you to vote subject to proving whatever you needed to prove. So those resources are available, but I would talk to Monroe County Board of Elections and to the Monroe County Democratic Committee.
I do want to just also make clear that we're a nonpartisan organization, right? It is really important.
I'm not.
It's important for us that our doors are open to everyone, no matter what political party they might be affiliated with. And what our role is really to look at what the law says and determine what we can do for that individual based on their needs.
I have two areas I'm interested in. One is the funding. So United Way designated agency, collaborating with Rochester Area Community Foundation, Greater Rochester Health Foundation. Those places have some money.
Yes, so we are all recipients of United Way funding. We're all United Way designated agencies. I'll speak for Law New York. So Greater Rochester Health Foundation has supported, for example, our medical legal partnership. They were a big supporter of us actually doing a study to determine how we impacted health outcomes and how we had a positive impact on health outcomes. So foundation support is incredibly important. It's unfortunately a very small portion of our budgets, but foundations in our community, they are, increasingly flexible and really responsive to the needs of our community members. And so I don't mean to leave them out. So I appreciate you bringing them up.
So my other question relates to a friend who her mental health has been impacted by her struggle with the legal system. So I was wondering if you have anybody on staff that can provide support to, people who are just so stressed or people who have brain injuries, it's their ability to kind of, parse through what they need to do. They don't have it. So do you have like a mental health partner in your organization?
So we definitely partner with non-legal organizations to make sure we're treating individuals holistically. And, many individuals come to our doors with either mental health issues, substance abuse issues, TBIs, and it definitely impairs the ability to, frankly, go through an already complex system, right? So it would already be complicated regardless of additional barriers. And so we would want to hear from you. And I'm again going to point out Danielle Moskowitz, who's in the audience today. Danielle is the managing attorney of our Rochester office covering Monroe County. So she is an important person to meet if you might need to send a referral or talk through a referral and figure out where the support in the community lies for that individual.
Great. Thank you very much.
Do you have an outreach program that involves our high school education system, that the students understand the civil justice system? And if, is the teaching now in our high school curriculum adequate for young people to understand this, that they can bring this home to their neighborhood and realize what systems are available for civil justice issues?
Okay, so I'm going to address the second question first. And whether or not, our local school system is adequately addressing these items, I'm not sure I'm in the best position to answer, but I'll tell you my experience is I never knew this type of law existed. I thought you could get an attorney if you had a lot of money or if you're in a lot of trouble. And so when I grew up, I had no lawyers in my family. So I didn't even think of it as a potential career path. And when I went to college, I had an undeclared major because, again, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I just happened to be assigned to the pre-law advisor. And if I hadn't had that connection, I'm not sure that I would have looked at this path. And even at that time, it took me until the end of law school and doing a fellowship with Brooklyn Legal Services to really understand what civil legal services mean. So I think, if my experience is indicative of the world around us, I think a lot of people don't understand that there's portions of the legal system that can help you with your day-to-day life, right? And the challenges you experience just obtaining your basic needs. Now, in terms of our involvement in the school system, over the years, we've done a number of individual projects. For example, for a couple years as the Teleska Center, we worked with East High School and had a VISTA staff member on site there in order to really try to understand how we could increase referrals for family members and make sure students were aware of our programs. Because when you need help, who do you go to? You go to someone you trust. That might not be a lawyer in downtown Rochester, right? It might be your church. It might be your school teacher. It might be your doctor. And so as we look at our programs and our service delivery, what we try to do is link up with who are those trusted individuals in our community. And, as we talked about before, Law New York service areas more expansive than Monroe. We just in Steuben County did do a presentation to a local high school. We had our director of pro bono affairs there, and with the goal of, we're going to do some individual internships, but also just making sure that the word is out there for both linking people to services, but also, broadening people's mindset about how you can contribute to the world after you leave high school. Thank you for that question.
Just curious about criminal issues. I'm sure you have people that you talk to have problems with the criminal justice system. Do you have referral sources or organizations you coordinate with for that?
Absolutely. We definitely coordinate with our public defenders and our conflict defenders offices. In some of our smaller counties, there might not be an organizational provider, and so it's more collaboration with the private bar. In this community, there's been joint presentations and trainings, and definitely some individual case consultations when we find that there's civil legal issues that are being impacted by the criminal justice system. We do have a reentry program where we assist individuals predominantly with barriers to employment. So any individual with a past criminal conviction, an employer may use that past criminal conviction to deny employment. We also see this in state licensures. So Department of Health, many of you know, home health care aides, there's sometimes a crisis in staffing there. Individuals could have a minor criminal conviction from 20 years ago, not related at all to that employment opportunity, but employers sometimes use that as an immediate bar to employment. So we do take on those cases with the goal of opening up employment opportunities for our community members.
As an aside, in Monroe County, the Monroe County Public Defender's Office is one of the best law firms in the county. It's a stunningly good operation. So if you have someone with a criminal problem who can't pay, Monroe County Public Defender is the place to go.
Do you feel that 4 organizations is enough for Teleska Center? Or do you anticipate expanding that umbrella, so to speak?
I think we're running out of room in the Teleska Center, so I will put that out there. Do I think 4 organizations are enough? In many of the counties we serve, again, we're the only one. So this is pretty amazing. I do want to point out there's other legal services in our community. So Workers' Justice Center, Center for Disability Rights. All of these advocacy organizations contribute to a better community health. I don't think I have a good answer for that. I think, what I would like to see us going forward is have more flexibility than we do so that we can truly be responsive to our community's needs. And the thing is, when we're, any nonprofit operating, often that flexibility is contingent on your funding and on your resources. And that's a big part of why we're here today.
Well, speaking of that, you said the foundation support is a minor part of your support. Where is the major part?
The major support is really from government funding. So I'll talk about Law New York specifically. 22% is from federal funding sources, again, government funding sources. And the majority of the remainder is state funding sources. Some of our biggest government support in the state is from the Office of Court Administration itself. Court administration. And we're fortunate that, we are in a state that is supportive of legal services and legal aid.
This is probably a really hard question to answer, but are you funded through like a particular period at this time? Or could it just all disappear in one swoop of the pen?
Okay. I do not think it would all disappear with one swoop of the pen. And again, I'll speak for my own agency because that's where my best knowledge base is. Law New York, we have about 80 different funding sources. And, an important part of our stability is diversified funding. It makes it a little bit more difficult to answer that question because every, funding source might have a different cycle. Sometimes we're funded January through December. Sometimes we're funded through the state fiscal year, April through March. Sometimes we receive funding that's 5-year funding. And so that's why I think, it's reasonable for me to say you wouldn't take it all away at one time. Now, I will tell you, our agency in particular was affected by a terminated contract recently, given some federal administrative changes. There was a dispute there, and at least in the temporary period of time while that lawsuit is pending, that funding has returned to us. So I do think many agencies, and not just legal services, nonprofits in general, are being impacted by changes at the federal level and how that has impacted our individual funding sources. So that funding source annualized is about $500,000. It's about 4 individuals at our organization.
Thank you. Are you able to collaborate nationally with what's going on for legal services or court actions that are being taken? Is there any national network that you can relate to kind of, I won't say stop it, but kind of delay what's happening or speak back about what's happening legally?
So a couple of things, different programs do have national entities that are taking up the cause. So I mentioned our contract termination. There's a national organization that actually led the way through that, and, obtained counsel through that lawsuit. And I think you'll see as, contract terminations happen, there are individuals coming together as a collective to fight those challenges within the court system. Now, speaking up generally, again, I'm going to say we're a nonpartisan organization, so we don't engage in that type of, some of these types of political activities. I might be making an inference about what you're referring to, but definitely for the legal challenges, we're getting together with our colleagues across the states in order to make sure that funding flows for really vital programs. Hopefully that answered your question. Okay. Happy to talk more afterwards as well.
Just wanted to ask a question that maybe relates not so much about your resources, but obviously we are witnessing an enormous downsizing of the federal government. And certainly speaking specifically about healthcare, enormous, 20,000 people. And I'm just wondering, with your, activism in health and housing, also particularly with the cuts that are about to happen, or if they haven't happened already in the federal side, do you witnessing any impact yet?
So we definitely, I'm talking a lot about funding and how that impacts our organization as a whole. Many of the changes are impacting our client communities. And a big part of our job right now is to stay on top of that and to make sure that we're knowledgeable and have the expertise for those individual community members. So if we're thinking in terms of healthcare access, some of the programs that Law New York and other agencies and Teleska Center provide are help with health insurance enrollment, help understanding your options. If there are federal cuts to Medicaid or other sources of healthcare, then our role is really to guide those community members into making sure that their needs are met. And that might be tougher depending on what rules come down. But our primary role is to make sure that we're keeping up with those changes so that we can advise our clients and work on their individual matters. Again, I feel like that's a answer, non-answer, because a lot of things are, well, I think there was a slide that said uncertainty. That's where we are right now, right? And so even for our community members, sometimes you get a call because someone's scared of what's going to happen, not necessarily because it's happened already. And I think we're a little bit in a holding pattern of waiting and seeing what's next and how it's going to affect the individuals in our community. And frankly, ensuring that we're ready for it.
Given that, are your caseloads growing and, or have they been recently? And do you anticipate that you will be having more calls and more people asking for your services?
Anytime there's changes that affect individuals' entitlement to benefits or availability of HUD support and housing, I expect an increase in calls and an increase in need for services. I'll give you the example of frankly, the eviction crisis that occurred throughout the pandemic, and still we're feeling the effects today. There was a dramatic increase in calls and requests for our services. We were fortunate in this community that there was also an increase in funding that allowed us to respond to that increase in need. That doesn't always happen. And, part of the uncertainty going forward is whether there'll be an increase or available resources if there are dramatic cuts that impact our client community. But absolutely, anytime there's a change in the law that would affect individuals' basic needs, I'm expecting an increase in phone calls.
Thank you, Teleska Center. That has been captivating and so informative. The scope is really amazing, the relativity of how many people you serve. Blue Cross Arena, our own sanctuary, was really very, very impactful. We can see how impactful you are. So let's give these guys a great round of applause. Wonderful. Very, thank you, thank you, thank you. Two quick announcements for the Sunday Forum. If anyone is interested in participating in the team and the committee moving forward, we always welcome more participants to join. I think we have Pat Tweet signed up for this, so that's good, but the more the merrier, so we can support great presentations such as this. And last but not least is next week, members of the Leap of Faith team here at DUPSI will be sharing the work they've been doing to take the Institute building off the books. And they've been doing a great deal of information gathering to determine how this part of our physical presence here might be put to best use, and they'll be sharing that with us next week. So thank you. And again, Teleska, thank you.